Welcome to the European Forum Alpbach. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska and you're watching TVP World, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome in our studio here in Austria, Vjosa Osmani, President of the Republic of Kosovo. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. A great pleasure.
Always a pleasure, and great to see you back on TVP World. So Kosovo has made some notable strides when it comes to electoral systems, economic resilience, and protection of fundamental rights. And these are the words of the members of the European Parliament, which is an important signal. However, there are still some challenges when it comes to Kosovo. Judicial reforms, media freedom, public administration efficiency. We also have the ever-present tension going on between Kosovo and Serbia. And these are some of the things that I would like to, for us to talk about today. So what would you say? How close or far, perhaps, is Kosovo in its proximity to the European Union? I know that you're an advocate of Kosovo getting closer, but what's your opinion as of now?
That's a difficult question to answer in terms of years or timelines, but I would say in terms of our alignment, in terms of our spirit, European spirit, in terms of our political will, and the will of our people to join the European, we are 97% in terms of proximity, or even 100%, because we are a country that fully aligns with the European Union. We are at a 100% alignment. 97% of the people of Kosovo are pro-European, pro-joining the European Union and NATO. In terms of reforms, whether it's rule of law reforms, economic reforms, fundamental rights, human rights reforms, we are the country in the Western Balkans that is doing best. So when it comes to values, we are quite close. But when it comes to politics, procedures, and hurdles, we are still quite far away, because, as you know, there are still 5 countries within the European Union that have not recognized Kosovo, and that is one hurdle. But then there's this other hurdle where, despite Kosovo being fully in alignment, and despite Kosovo being a country that truly sees the European Union as a values-based system, unfortunately, this doesn't seem to catch the eye of so many member states, and it looks like those of us that, have aligned with the EU, whether on sanctions against Russia or sanctions against Iran or other, things that really take you out of your comfort zone, but you stand with what is right. These have not been important for the European Union, because if you look at how our region has been progressing, Serbia, which is our neighbor, despite being at a 40% alignment with the European Union, despite not adopting sanctions against Russia or the other adversaries of the European Union, they are still moving on towards European Union membership. So it feels like the criteria and the values are not truly matters for some member states, at least. So we're trying to convince them. It doesn't mean that our patience will go green, quite the opposite. We're working on it.
It's a process.
It's quite a long process, and of course there are a lot of people that are frustrated, but for us there's never been any other alternative but the European Union. We don't flirt with other powers. We don't mess with malign powers, quite the opposite for us. That's the only path, European Union and NATO, and we're going to work as hard as it's required until we get our rightful place in these two organizations that, as I said, are, for us, most importantly, these are values-based systems, and that's why we want to join.
You said very interestingly that you don't flirt with other powers. How would you say that this relationship with Russia is forming right now, especially when we're looking at the war in Ukraine, especially when we're looking at the disinformation campaigns that are taking place, the hybrid warfare, which, for example, Poland is also a recipient of? How would you say Russia is actually playing part in that, accession process when it comes to Kosovo and European Union?
I oftentimes say that when we see malign forces like Russia, China, and Iran, this triangle of evil, trying to influence in the Western Balkans, they don't do it for charity, but they do it because they have some sort of a strategic interest to exert their power in an extremely important part of the European continent, because they believe that by destabilizing the Western Balkans, although they use completely different instruments, and it's mostly Russia, obviously, by destabilizing the Western Balkans, they want to destabilize the entire values-based system that the European Union and NATO are. We're in the neighborhood. We're very close to one another. We're just a 4-hour drive away from Bulgaria, just a 4-hour drive away from Hungary, a few more hours all the way to Poland. Obviously, when one place is in conflict, the rest is destabilized too, as we can see from Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Therefore, Russia's intention historically has been, but we can see it more present since 2022 when Ukraine was invaded. Russia's interest is to destabilize the Western Balkans for the purposes of having a spillover effect and having more conflict zones in Europe in a way that would also take the attention of the European Union away from Ukraine. I mean, Poland knows best. With actors like Russia, you can never count on goodwill. It's quite the opposite. Whatever they do it, whether it's short-term.
We've seen it all over.
Exactly. I mean, history shows we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to learn from history that even when they undertake a certain action, it's because they want to prepare, for example, for a future attack against some country. And of course, beyond Ukraine and Poland and the other countries in that part of Europe, they have always historically shown interest to also destabilize the Western Balkans, which is so crucial to have our part of Europe join the European Union and NATO, because I think that would put an end to these dreams of Russia of destabilizing Europe as a whole and stopping the project of Europe as a project of a Europe whole, free and at peace, which was intended by its founders. So it's crucial that we have supportive friends and allies like Poland and other countries within the European Union, because you know what we go through, you know where the dangers lie, you know what it means to have a crazy neighbor that has completely different ideas about democracy, about rule
and we
of law,
understand
and
the Russian
the
mingling
others.
when it comes
Exactly.
to domestic business.
You know, beyond arming Serbia to attack its neighbors, Russia has used, as you rightly pointed out, other instruments, mostly through disinformation campaigns and propaganda. They have immediately after the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, they've tripled the amount of money that they use in the Western Balkans for propaganda. They have the so-called Russian Humanitarian Center in Serbia, which is quite close to the border with Kosovo, and
How
there's
convenient.
nothing humanitarian
How
about that,
convenient.
obviously. According to the American Department of Defense, it's a Russian spy center. And you can see, you know, the more time passes, Serbia gets more money, more weapons from Russia, Belarus, also mingling with Iran now, which is another danger. And of course, with China, and they've become the only country in Europe to have the Chinese FK3 weapons system. So all of this shows that, you know, we have a destabilizing actor in our region, and we need the support of the European Union and NATO in order to stop it from, influencing the entire region in the wrong direction. In Kosovo, we've allowed for zero Russian influence, zero Chinese influence, and zero Iranian influence. Nevertheless, when you have neighbors who constantly, through that malign influence, try to destabilize Kosovo, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and the rest, it does create a challenge, as you pointed out. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, that doesn't mean that Kosovo is not a safe country. Quite the opposite. We've managed to successfully thwart every attempt by Serbia so far, also with the support of our NATO allies who are in Kosovo, including the excellent Polish soldiers who have been given an outstanding contribution for safety and security of all of our citizens, but in turn they have made the entire Western Balkans more safe and secure.
Let's take a look at the situation with Serbia, because there is a lot of conflict going on in there domestically. There is an upheaval, there is a social upheaval, and actually one of our guests here before today, Misha Glenny, he said something interesting about Serbia. He said they are almost on the verge of a revolution. How do you think what happens in Serbia is affecting Kosovo right now?
I think what happens in Serbia right now will affect the wider region, I wouldn't say Kosovo particularly, but the wider region, because the same way that what happens in Russia will affect the wider region and will affect the entire European continent. You know, when you have a country in your proximity that is led by an autocrat that does not believe in the value of human rights, in the value of rule of law, in the value of civil society and freedom of speech, obviously that has a negative effect everywhere because the Vučić regime has been using the propaganda machine as their main instrument for decades. Perhaps just to remind your viewers that when Milosevic was waging wars in Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Kosovo, and so on, he had picked one person to be his propaganda minister, and that was Vučić. From all of former Yugoslavia, he had picked one guy to be the propaganda minister during the war And that was Aleksandar Vučić, the guy who's the president today. So that's what he does best, propaganda. Unfortunately, he has used it in a way to kind of convince many in the West that, he's kind of sitting in two chairs and he's trying, to be in between Russia and the West and so on. But he's not in between. He's sitting on only one chair, and that is Russia's chair. The other one is pure acting based on his experience from being propaganda minister of Milosevic. So propaganda is what he uses now also against his own people. And I think it would be...
there was this, pardon my interruption, but there was this televised address that he had for the people who are protesting, claiming that they will try to find a way to have a conversation about what's happening in Serbia. But
they have, he's been saying that all along. But again, I don't want to meddle into the internal affairs of Serbia. I do understand that the students and the others are protesting for rule of law. They're protesting against corruption. And I think that is an extremely important value of every society, to ask for more rule of law, to ask or to protest against corruption, and to ask for more human rights and freedoms. And that is essential, I would say, because it would have a positive effect in the rest of the region, because one day when Serbia is led by people who truly believe in these values, the values of human rights, fundamental rights, as well as rule of law, that will also mean better relations with neighbors.
But do you think what happens in Serbia right now is actually going to take the attention away from steering trouble when it comes to that relationship with Kosovo?
In fact, Vučić has always been doing the opposite. Every single time that he's in trouble within the country, he tries to cause problems within Bosnia and Herzegovina. Yes, the usual tactic. He tries to cause problems within Bosnia and Herzegovina, within Kosovo and the rest of the region, so that he uses his nationalistic card and, look what I'm doing, I'm saving the people, and, the usual propaganda. And in this sense, I don't think he will focus more on protesters. Quite the opposite. He will try to shift the focus elsewhere. He's done that before, but of course we're ready to defend our country, and we're ready to thwart any kind of aggression that he might have in mind.
One of the things that we've covered extensively on TVP World is this sort of parliamentary turmoil, something that I need to mention because it's making rounds in the news as we speak. We know that there's a fallout for the inability to actually constitute the parliament, choose the speaker of the parliament. How do you think this paralysis prevents Kosovo from realizing that goal of EU membership?
As we speak, there is another attempt in the parliament to actually constitute it. I think it's unfortunate that the people still don't have the parliament for which they have voted. And the will of the people that stems from the elections has not been materialized yet. As you rightly pointed out at the beginning of the interview, Kosovo has the strongest electoral democracy in our region. And we've always had, smooth transitions of powers, very, very strong democracy, both during the elections as well as after the elections. Right now, the turmoil, well, I wouldn't call it turmoil, it's kind of an impasse rather than a turmoil. So it's like nothing is happening rather than something is happening. So the point is, right now, there's a lack of a political agreement between political parties to form a coalition majority. Because the political parties don't want to work with one another. There's the lack of trust and quite a big polarization, I would say, which is unfortunate because Kosovo is losing out a lot. The more time we spend without a parliament and without a government that is voted by the new parliament, the more we are losing out European Union projects, the more we are losing out a window of opportunity that we have now with the new US administration that I've been working with in my meetings there. So, as president of the country, as head of state and head of foreign policy, I do a lot. But most of these agreements that I reach, they will have to end up in the parliament either for ratification or to the government for implementation. So we will need, the people of Kosovo will need to have an effective government with full powers and an effective parliament that can oversee the work of the government, because, as I said, we're a strong democracy with 3 layers of governance, and this has worked really well so far. I do hope, and of course I take the opportunity once again to call on all political parties to put the country's interests first and leave their differences aside and try to form a coalition and a parliamentary majority that will take Kosovo forward, because the world is not going to wait for us. Obviously, windows of opportunities open up just just a little bit for countries like us, and also
it's
for a very
important
short
to put
time.
the foot in the door.
So catching the momentum is key because, as you know, the world is in a turmoil, and we can't pretend that we are a priority on anyone's table any longer. So to catch that momentum takes a lot of leadership, and I hope that this leadership will be exhibited by the political party leaders very soon. And we'll have a parliament. I mean, there will be many that will say, well, this happens in Europe. We had Belgium without a government for 2 years. We've had Austria without a government for 6 months. I do understand that, but we don't have that luxury. We don't have the luxury of waiting for so long, because as a country that really needs to move ahead with so many reforms, with joining international organizations, we need to act more swiftly than countries that are already in these organizations and don't face the challenges that we face.
The domestic situation, how do you think foreign actors such as Russia, Iran, China, how do they interfere with the political processes that are taking place in Kosovo and possibly trying to influence the Balkan region?
Well, the European Parliament and the European Observation Mission has concluded in its report that Serbia, and obviously there's also Russian influence there, has meddled in Kosovo's elections through a Serbian political party in Kosovo. So there's always this illegal interference from the side of Serbia that is aided and abetted by Russia. We haven't seen influence from China and Iran in political processes. Obviously, their way of trying to influence is completely different. But as I said, it's mostly economic and so on. But we haven't allowed for such influence to go through. Our biggest challenge, as I said, is the fact that Serbia continues to see its states or its neighboring states as temporary states. It's the same, kind of imperialistic and hegemonic mindset that Russia has. And through that, they try to interfere in electoral processes in Kosovo, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and the rest of the region. And they have been doing that for quite a long time, and they are aided by Russia in that sense. But right now, I wouldn't say that there is an influence in any of the majority political parties in Kosovo on how they act towards creating a new government or how they act towards creating a new parliament. It's mostly, the personal beliefs that our political parties have on who they want to work with, who they don't want to work with. There's no Russian or Serbian or any influence. It's just very local.
So as the representative of your country and your people, obviously you focus on growth and the EU accession, and growth is the most important factor. What steps is Kosovo going to take in order to make that growth happen and get closer in its proximity to the European Union?
Obviously, we've never stopped doing our homework, whether it's economic reforms, rule of law reforms, and in reforms in making our system stronger, our democracy more resilient. And even at this time, when we still haven't constituted a parliament and a new government, we're working on that. Because it's very crucial that our path towards the European Union never stops. Sometimes it's smaller steps, sometimes it's slower steps, but it's never steps backwards. That is crucial. We are working very hard to convince a few remaining countries within the European Union to give a candidate status to Kosovo, because we're the only country in the Western Balkans without a candidate status. It's a very challenging political process, but we're working on it. I think it's in the strategic interest of the European Union to allow all countries of the Western Balkans to move towards membership. And there are 6 countries in the Western Balkans. 5 already have a candidate status. Kosovo doesn't, for purely domestic considerations that some countries have. It's not like they have anything against Kosovo per se, but they have their own domestic problems. But we're trying to find a way out so that we can move forward with that process in a way that we can also open chapters of negotiations, and that then makes the entire process very concrete, because there's more concrete homework. So that is one area where we're working in terms of economy. There's still so much that we have to do. Kosovo truly has the potential, being the country with the youngest population in Europe, a population that is, brilliant, tech-savvy, multilingual, that has traveled the world, gained so much experience, and can really contribute to Europe as a whole, not just to Kosovo, in terms of economic growth. So, as I said yesterday when talking to students here in Alpbach, it's about time that our region is seen as a potential. not as a burden for the European Union. A potential for more security, a potential for more economic growth, a potential for more technology, a potential for more youth, and I would say also for more European spirit. You know, a country where 97% of the people truly believe in the Europe and its values that was the same belief as its founders. Not a Europe of interest, not a Europe of being a cash machine, a Europe that stands in the values of human rights, democracy, and rule of law. And that is what has always defined Europe as different from these malign actors that we talked about earlier. And that's why we want to join. Not just because of the economic growth, that is important, but we want to earn it. We want to earn it for being truly European and for contributing to the values on which the EU stands.
What a statement. And it all is based on the equivalent exchange of giving something and getting something back and having a healthy cooperation. Thank you so much, Madam President.
Thank you so
always
much.
A pleasure to have you on TVP World.
Likewise, always a pleasure to be with you.
Pleasure's all mine. Vjosa Osmani, President of the Republic of Kosovo, was my guest. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska and you're watching TVP World. Please do stay tuned for more.